Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning, good evening, good day. So I try to say, welcome to the sixth and final Postgres Extension mini summit. I'm your host, David Wheeler. And today, what I thought we'd do is kind of go over the list of issues I think that I've dreamed up and that I've jotted down over the last couple I'll see what I can do about the camera in a minute, Jeremy. Actually, Adam or Stephen, you might have permission to futz with that. Um, I thought I'd go over the list of stuff that I've written down of possible potential topics to take on at the Extension Summit in Vancouver in 2 weeks. That's on May 28th. These are things that I've written down just as I've been thinking through the whole architecture myself, but also things I've jotted down, things that have come up in these summits. And what I'm thinking here is that we could get some sense of the topics that we want to actually cover there at the summit. There is room for, I think, 45 people in the room we're in. And my assumption is that we will break it up unconference style into 4 or 5 different groups, and people can move to corners or outside if the weather's good, maybe occupy a hallway. I'm inquiring with the organizers about how we might get that to work. I'm not sure how it's going to work, but we will figure out how to do as best we can with the resources we have there. To that end, though, I started so let me kind of go. I guess I started the introduction. You remember from the first presentation, the first mini summit, I was showing a list of like, oh, here are things that people to talk. Here are potential topics that might come up as we're thinking through what's to be addressed in the ecosystem. And I left off by saying what's important to you. And so we're hoping to surface kind of the most important issues that we want to try to address at the summit and kind of create an hierarchy. To that end, I've created this Canva board. Actually, let me oops. I was going to paste it in. I can do that in a second here. You can see it here. Hopefully you can see the board here. Go back to Zoom and cuts. How does the computer even work? So I was following the open technology practice here, and trying to set things up where I have kind of the rules and explanation here. I expect to do a brief introduction, or one of us to do a brief introduction at people to talk at the summit, the first thing in the morning. Kind of the principles of the open technology, which are more or less familiar if you've done on conferences, but open technology specifically says whoever comes are the right people. Whatever happens is the only thing that could happen. Whenever it starts is the right time, but we start at 2 p.m. and we have only 3 hours, so we'll try to make the best of it. And when it's over, it's over. And whatever happens is the right place. There's the law of mobility. So if you start interested in one topic and you're, attending kind of a session or a discussion about one topic and you decide maybe you want to do something else, you can wander over to the other one. Open technology considers these people to be like bumblebees who cross-pollinate between topics, and butterflies are the people who are like hovering around a particular topic to make it happen. And come to be prepared to be surprised about what will come up. Hopefully all of you can access this. Let me know if you have any problems. I've split it up now into kind of the topics in these Post-its here, and you can zoom in as much as you want and specify like, okay, we might have 4 or 5 spaces, pick a space, pick, a session. We have room for, there's one too many rows here. Probably two hour-long sessions. So I'm assuming we'll have 15 minutes to half an hour to open up the session and do intros and split up the sessions, then have people do an hour on one topic and an hour on a second topic. And at the end, I should put another row on this table, we'll do the readout in which we talk about kind of decisions we came to there. So all you have to do is, if you are interested in facilitating any one of these topics, you can simply drag it in and stick your name on it. And I have instructions for how to do that in here. But first, I thought I'd kind of briefly go over the list of topics as I've imagined it. I posted this on Slack a week or two ago, or a couple weeks ago, and kind of added to it as things have come up in the discussions. But I wanted to kind of give a high level view of what these brief descriptions mean. But this is ad hoc. I don't have anything super planned here. Please feel free to jump in at any time. Hopefully you all can turn on. I think I've turned on talking permitted for everybody. And or stick your hand up, and we'll be glad to figure out other stuff, especially if you're thinking of other topics or related things, or maybe things should be merged. So any questions or thoughts or comments now? Okay. I put these in broad categories. They can be, there's some crossover and what have you, but the first one I think of is metadata. And this is one I've thought about a fair bit, and I kind of drafted an RFC for the kinds of things to put in an updated metadata standard, like how do you specify third-party dependencies when, PostGIS depends on certain additional libraries to be installed. How can those be specified in a ideally platform neutral way within the metadata? How to specify the different types of extensions there are. Stephen wrote a blog post last year kind of about this. You have create extensions. You have extensions that you simply use the load command for. You have things like background workers. You have applications or what have you. You have things that need shared preload libraries and things that don't. How do we say, okay, describe those things about an extension within the package where we want to distribute? Taxonomies is something that's come up a few times. PGXN currently allows extension authors to put an arbitrary number of tags into their meta JSON spec file. It's not a spec file, meta JSON file. And maybe in part because of the precedent of the stuff that I released early on, people mostly put in stuff in there to describe it, like FDW or function or JSON or something like that. And something that the newer binary distribution packaging systems lately have highlighted, and I've seen this in particular on Trunk, is they have a curated list of categories for things that they go into, that they assign. So there might be different ways we want to classify stuff. Another approach is crates.io has a canonical list of categories, or I forget what they call them, slugs, I think. And authors can use those. And those are handy because actually people find that they group things together in a more useful way. Like these are related to data analytics, or these are related to vector search kind of stuff, things like that, as opposed to the descriptive tags we have now. So what ought that to look like? What kind of controls we have in place? Who might want to use it? How would we specify system requirements? Like this this package requires only a subset of OSs, or the version of an OS, or the version of Postgres, or CPU features. Stephen's mentioned some vector-based ones a few times, but there's also things like encryption instructions that are provided on most chips, but it might be useful to specify those. So, or the architecture, of course, like this supports Arch64, but not AMD 64, whatever, right? How should we specify that? Categorization, I kind of covered that under taxonomies. Versioning, I blogged about this a couple months ago. I'm reasonably sure we should just stick to December, but I think it's worth bringing up. I believe that's it. Thoughts on metadata or stuff I'm leaving out here. This is in addition to the stuff that's in the meta.json spec. This is also leaves room for overlap with core stuff, like how do we create one sort of metadata for everything that might subsume like the control file as well as metadata spec, or trunk.yaml, toml, or what have you. Very well. The next category I've come up with is the registry or the source registry. This is thinking through how we should evolve the PGXN root registry for distributing extension source code. So there are questions like identity, namespacing, and uniqueness. These are broad categories of things, but identity is like, how do you identify yourself to the system and claim ownership over something? What sort of namespacing should we use? Most systems, including PGXN, just use an arbitrary string, and then you own that string from there on in. But other systems like Go allow you to use domain-based namespacing for packages, which is really nice because then you have a lot more flexibility, or it could switch between different versions or forks or whatever. And then the level at which there's uniqueness of the namespacing. This to me is kind of an open question. Another one I thought of is that it could just be like, rather than today where it's just the string that names your extension distribution, it could be like your username and the string. And that makes it easier for like when somebody abandoned something and somebody else forks it and takes it over and has a new username, then maybe people would be able to switch more easily. Stuff like that, to be able to account for and handle that sort of evolution in a way that single string uniqueness makes trickier. Distributed versus centralized publishing. This is something I've written about a couple times. I am quite attracted to the model that Go has, where packages are not centrally distributed, but they are just in 3 or 4 supported version control systems. And as long as they use semvers and appropriate tags, anybody can use them. And the centralized index just indexes it the first time it's pulled. And this is where the host names come into play as well as part of the namespacing. But it allows the system to be much more distributed. Now, they cache all of them in a number of different regions as well. So when you download stuff through the Go stuff and you say, give me XYZ package, it'll generally give you the cache version, but it'll fall back on the repositories as well. So there's still the centralized stuff. So I think there's a lot to that, and it kind of goes along with the namespacing issue. But there are other ideas at play as well. Like almost all the other packaging source code distribution systems you see today just use an arbitrary, a centralized system. Includes crates or CPAN or NPM and all the rest. What should that look like? And maybe there are questions there like, is there some sort of other protocol we should adopt as an abstraction, kind of like Docker has, where Docker is not a centralized repository other than hub.docker.com. Anybody can create a new Docker repository, give it a host name, and then that becomes something that anybody can pull with, and it's much more distributed. So there are a number of ideas to think through there. Binary packaging and distribution patterns. I actually have a separate slide that goes into more detail on that, but there are implications, I think, for source code distribution, particularly with the metadata, but perhaps other things, but also how it might vary from source distribution that we want to think through. Federated distribution, well, that's where we're getting at the Docker idea or the OCI idea that Alvaro has proposed in a blog post a few weeks ago, stuff like that. What services and tools to improve our build? This kind of goes to the fundamental question of why we've had all these new packaging systems pop up in the last year or so. People are saying there are problems that, aren't solved by PGXN. How do we, as a community and collectively, decide what's the important bits and what we should build and provide? So like, developer tools and command line clients and search and browse and discovery, and they get into that. We get into that a bit more in some of the other topics, but this is a high level idea. Stats, reports, and badging. This is right now another kind of fundamental problem that I think some of the emerging registries have tried to address is, how do you find something? How do you know if it's any good? How do you know who's responsible for it? How do you know whether there's some consensus across the community to use it? And so what the idea is then, what sort of additional metadata could we provide at the registry level to include some hint about that? For example, a system to constantly or regularly fetch, stars and some sort of statistical analysis of a GitHub or a Bitbucket stuff, or people wanted review sites or the ability to comment on systems. And there's also badging. I think that if, in particular, if we're doing sort of build and test matrices for extensions, that will not only encourage people to better support broad arrays of versions of Postgres and platforms, but also to be badges for that, so you can see how well they support various platforms and any other sort of badging, quality badging or what have you. So just kind of a brainstorming of what sorts of things might be useful there, and what might be best to build first might be the low hanging fruit. Oops, doing that. Any other questions? Any questions, comments, thoughts, additional suggestions on the root registry? Jeremy, yeah, go ahead.
So the idea is, so there's all these topics on the left, and then these are getting lined up into the schedule. And the schedule is, so there's five different rooms. And so if it's like horizontally aligned, that's at the same time.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, these are all
interesting.
one. These are all session 2 down here.
I was kind of waiting to jump to that. It seemed like you were just doing kind of a like a review of all the
Yes.
topics we've covered, but like I was kind of waiting until you got through everything to bring that up.
Oh yeah, good call. Good call. Okay. I'll wait.
Yeah. But yeah, I have the same kind of question / concern. Like, okay, this is a great list of topics. Like, now what do we want to do with the time in Vancouver? And like, what's the anyway? But well, I don't know. What do you think, David? Do you think we need to go through everything kind of on the list? How do you want to spend the time today?
I was trying to do a quick review just so people knew what these words mean. If you all feel like you have a good idea, or you want to go in here and add ones of your own, please do.
Well, I mean, like I commented in the chat, like it's amazing to see how much ground we've covered, and it's good to have a quick recap. I mean, I'm looking, it's 9:22 right now, Pacific time, 22 after the hour, wherever you are. I just want to make sure we don't run out of time going through everything, that's all.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'll make it work. I can speed up a little here. I know I can be verbose about some of this stuff.
Unless someone's from India, in which case they have half-hour time zone.
I was gonna say. All right. Oops. Keep doing that. So binary packaging. This is the problem that PGX-Man and Trunk have tried to solve with varying degrees of success. But I think it'd be worthwhile for us to think through as a community, ideally, what should be a community-provided binary packaging system look like? And what's the format? Do we want to do tarballs? Do we want to do something like OCI, like Alvaro proposed? Do we want something like RPM or apt or Python wheels? And I think that's actually something I'm super interested to get into. There was a question that came up the other day, 2 weeks ago in Yuri's presentation. I think Daniela suggested that the Python wheel package format allows you to put dynamic libs into the wheel. So that's pretty interesting, I think worth looking into as well. How would we go about building a community-based binary packaging registry, right? And do the build farming, and what platforms and architectures and OSs it would support, and what sort of security, trust, and verification it has, the centralization, who runs it, who's responsible for it, how it all works at a high level. Felipe, first mini summit I can, oh, thanks for coming, Felipe. Again, interrupt me anytime. And next topic is developer tooling. Let's see, I need to allow Damien to talk and allow everybody else to talk. All right. Oops. Developer tooling. Today, this is kind of all over the place. There's a PGXN client. There's a PGXN utils client that actually doesn't compile anymore, as far as I can tell. There's PTRX stuff, maybe a few other things. What sorts of tools would be useful for developers who actually develop and build extensions? a command line clients to do things like, and APIs to do metadata management, or scaffolding your source code and adding new features through some sort of templating system. The packaging and publishing system here, right? Based on how we ultimately elect to distribute source code and how we ultimately elect to distribute binary code. How does that packaged up with the namespacing and all those sorts of decisions we made about, and to be as easy as possible for the developer. What build pipelines do we support today? There's PGXS and PGRX are perhaps the two most common, but I've seen stuff that's, GNU autoconf configure stuff. I've seen stuff that's basically Rust or Go or Python based builds. Do we want to support those things, and how do we integrate them with our binary packaging format and with where Postgres itself expects to put stuff? And I think this is kind of an important topic, because one of the things I've been dealing with is I've talked to like Apache, the people behind Apache Age, and a couple other projects, is like they put stuff like in user local by default. I'm like, well, it'd be better if it went where, PG config told you to put it. How do we want to go about integrating those things? And CI tooling for CI/CD workflows to make it as easy as possible to test across a variety of platforms, Postgres versions, and those pipelines. Kind of a broad community topic here. This gets back to what I was talking about before in terms of like where things are hosted. There's a Postgres identity service that does OAuth 2. Is that something we want to plug into? Ideally, is there a desire for the community to provide the infrastructure for the systems, or for at least the core foundational systems of PGXN v2? And how will we do that? Who would go about supporting it? The people who work on the development ideally would also, handle the DevOps, but it should be closely working with whoever is providing the infrastructure to make sure it's all copacetic, and that there's a plan for when something happens and, people exit the community for whatever reason, how the support will continue to be maintained, which I don't think is there today for PGXN. Another topic I have is documentation. How do we help engineers to figure out how to build extensions, tutorials, and reference for all the things and all the various details? Do we end up writing like a book on this sort of thing, or do we just have very specific focused tutorials that are like, oh, so you want to build a foreign data wrapper, here's a guide for that, or you just need to do a background worker, here's an example repository to clone? What should those things look like? Yes, create extension hooks, background workers, clients and app and services, web apps, native apps. And this also kind of covers the variety of different kinds of extensions that we might want to package and distribute. And then there's all the stuff that I filed kind of under core, because I think it impacts the core Postgres project and how it may need to evolve, or we might want it to evolve over time. One is the second extension directory, which there's a patch pending now, but it'll probably be deferred until Postgres 17 ships. It's on hold while we're in the freeze. But this is a patch that Christoph Berg wrote for the Debian distribution, is currently in there. But this allows you to have a second destination directory for your extensions that Postgres knows to find stuff in, including shared object libraries, which then would make it easier for projects like Postgres.app and for Docker, immutable Docker containers to mount a new directory and just have all the stuff be there. I would love to see some sort of, more coherent idea of what an extension package looks like, where like if I install pgtap, all of its files are in a single subdirectory that Postgres can access, rather than right now where it's in package config and the sharedir and the libdir and the docsdir, and it's kind of spread all over. Should there be a documentation standard in the way you have like JavaDoc and RustDoc and GoDoc, where it's integrated into the source code so it's easy to use and there's tooling to build effective documentation? Because today mostly people just write short readmes and leave it at that, and it's not really sufficient for a lot of projects. There's the long-standing ideas of inline extensions that Dimitri proposed back as far as 2013 in something they called units. I think in Oracle calls them packages or modules. There's trusted language extensions are making a stab at this, trying to make something like it work with the tooling we have today. How should that evolve? What sorts of ideas do we want to try to adapt to make it so that you don't have to have physical access to the file system of a service to manage your extensions? You could do it all over SQL or libpq. How can we minimize restarts? There are a lot of extensions that require, put this in the shared library. What is it called, Stephen? The system shared library, I forget. Preload system library.
Shared preload library and the session preload libraries.
Yeah, with a session, I think you can put it in there and then you start your session, but the preload is trickier. I mean, there are ways to minimize restarts. So it's just kind of a broad category I threw in there. What namespacing is there? This I touched upon when I wrote about the Go namespacing a while ago. My assumption is right now, even if we decide to have, user/string or hostname/user/string as the namespacing for package distribution and source distribution, Postgres itself still has to stick to a single string, but we'd like to see that evolve in the future. What kind of sandboxing, code signing, and security and trust could be built into the system? Part of the reason they've resisted having a second extension directory up to now is they wanted to have one place where everything was, where the DBA knows where things are, and it's easier ideally to manage there. But it's also because otherwise people will put junk in there. Are there other ideas we can borrow from other projects or technologies to say, okay, anything in here is sandboxed? And how is it sandboxed? Is it just for a single database or a single user? Do we have some sort of code signing we can build into the system so that when you install an extension, Postgres verifies it? What other kinds of security and trust could we put in there? This is kind of a high-level, future-looking topic that occurred to me, but it comes up especially when I talk to the big cloud vendors. An idea I had again while Yuri was talking is dynamic module loading, or no, I think it was when Jonathan was talking, because there's some question like, okay, PL Rust is a trusted language, but if I want to use crates, how do we use the crates? Well, a DBA has to approve a pre-installed list of crates that's on the file system that then it can use. But what if there was a hook where in your language you use the example I have here is PL Perl. I say use thing, and it knows there's a hook into the use command in Perl, where it then will look in a table that the DBA manages or somebody manages and can load it from there. Just a funky idea I had then, again, to kind of get away from the file system and have a way to more easily have people through permissions be able to install these things in a safe way. A thing that did come up during Yuri's talk was binary compatibility of minor releases or some sort of ABI stability. I'd be curious what might be interesting to bring up with hackers on formalizing something there. Although it has seemed mostly pretty stable over time to me, that doesn't mean it's been fully stable. I'd be curious to hear about the exceptions. So that's my quick review. I did the remainder of them in 11 minutes there.
Well done.
Well, so what I'd like to do actually is send an email to all the people who are registered to come to the summit in 2 weeks, as well as all of you, to be able to access this board and put, stars or icons or something, stickers, which you can access.
Well, I do feel like there's something, maybe missing from the board.
Yeah.
Which I don't know that it's something we would have wanted to put on sooner, but I kind of feel like one of the next steps is just getting down into getting down into the trenches and looking at actual extensions and seeing how a lot of these topics are going to apply once we start looking at the list. I don't know. Trying to figure this out. So I was looking around a bit. I don't see. It's funny. I see a mailing list thread from a year or two ago where right after Joel made his big list of 1,000 extensions, he jumped on the hackers list and said, "Hey, should we stick this somewhere like on the wiki?" And it looks like nobody quite got around to doing anything like that. But that's where I was kind of thinking about poking around, maybe starting to work on something like that. But I think once we start to look at some of the actual extensions, it'll help us with a lot of these topics, kind of figure out what we're talking about too. Like when you're when you're looking at trying to figure out dependencies, when you're, you know, once you start to figure out some of the actual extensions where this is a problem and other ones where it's not, it might help us to be a lot more specific about the problem that we're trying to solve, or whether it's versioning, whether it's which platform something is going to build on, all that kind of stuff. But that's where I was thinking a topic that's, or maybe a next step or a topic that's missing is like just how many, or you were talking about how many extensions even build, you know, today. If you just go through the extensions that are on PGXN right now, how many of them are actually even work at all?
Right.
So starting to work down that list.
Yeah. So two thoughts on that. One is create a sticky with the topic you want and stick it in a place that's appropriate here, or create another category if you think that's relevant, right?
Well, it's kind of weird because what I almost like, what I want to do, what I would envision is what I want to do on the wiki. I'll see if I can start this off today, actually, on the if I have rights to make a Postgres wiki page. Is that I want to kind of make just a list of extensions, like a table, where down the left is the extensions and across the top is like where that extension is distributed today. So just extensions that are already distributed, like in multiple places, like, and I'm not talking about the stuff that's on core, because that's kind of a given that that's everywhere. But you know, something like PG cron, right, is already on, or PG audit. There's already like 20, you know, all of the major distributions of Postgres include, or anybody who has extensions probably has that one. So that gives some sense of well, there's kind of certain extensions that everybody already packages. Those are obviously really important extensions if everybody is including them.
Right.
And then the next thing I wanted to do was the same thing with like the list of those extensions on the left, but then across the top, like a column for each of the categories you have here. Like, so for say PG audit, like binary packaging, well, maybe not documentation and core, but like certainly the stuff across the top, metadata, registry, packaging, developer stuff. You know, for PG audit, are there packaging concerns? For PG audit, like, are there, you know, go down the list of registry topics like identity, distributed, you know, where is the source for PG audit? Is it, you know, the definitive upstream? Is it GitLab? Is it GitHub? Is it git.postgres? You know, I could just kind of go right down the list of each of these topics for PG audit, and then I could go down the list of all of your topics for PG hint plan. That's another big one, right? PG hint plan is all over the place. And like, you know, work right, each of your topics, I could take and apply it to each of like the top 10 extensions. And there might be different things that rise to the surface for PG hint plan than there are for like PG vector.
Yeah, that sounds like a worthwhile project to me, and it could be a useful reference for any of these topics for sure. Also,
in fact,
a lot of work.
Yeah, well, and another way to like think about Vancouver, like, might be instead of like splitting people up like by these topics, I'm just kind of spitballing here. This might be a terrible idea, but like you could take, if you had like a list of like 20 or 30 important extensions, you could just split people up into groups and say, okay, here's 5 extensions for you. Here's a different 5 extensions for you. Now cover all these topics for your 5 extensions. You know, so you might have one group that's looking at like PG hint plan and PG vector and PG audit, and then a different group that has PG cron and I don't know, whatever else we come up with on a list. But then, you know, that's just another way you could potentially slice it up.
Yeah, so I think that you're thinking about it the inverse the way I've been thinking of it. I guess mine is perhaps a little more centralized or top down, and that comes from, you know, having worked on PGXN in the past and thinking about what we'd like to build in the future. But there's no reason it couldn't kind of be bottom up from those things. And I will say, when I was working on the metadata RP, I did work through an example that allowed me to actually change it of some actually really fussy extension. I don't remember which one it was. Oh no, it was the ML extension, I think. So I think that could be a really useful exercise. But the idea here with this open technology thing is you can create a sticky here and make a pitch for it and have people vote ideally by putting, you know, a little star or something on them. And I'm hoping that, well, we can try to figure out which ones we feel are the most important, but ultimately anybody can grab one of these and say, I want to own this. I'm picking it in the session 1 here, and, you know, put your name on it by clicking add your name here, right? And so now I would be doing this one. So they can be anything for the most part.
Sure. I think I don't totally totally grok the Canva board and how that all maps out, but at the end of the day, I think whatever you say we're doing in Vancouver, I'm behind it 100%.
I'm trying
We'll
to
do it.
I'm trying to make it as open as possible. If there's something you want to talk
Yeah.
about, make a sticky.
Yeah. Well, I'll add a little box, but like I said, I don't know. I don't know, like, if yeah, I can add a box. I'm not sure though how this maps to what you want to do with the time in Vancouver.
So let me see if this hopefully will answer the question a bit. One is, you know, to do an intro and welcome and talk about the topics, give people time to look at them. And then I want to send it in advance so people can have a sense of it in advance. And, you know, I know the way they do the Postgres unconference that's been the last day of PGCon for years. They have people come and put like a sticky or star or some sort of sticker on the topics they like, and then they pick the ones that have the most, and those are the ones they line up in here. But the idea of the open technology stuff is a person can decide on whatever topic they want. They can create their sticky. They can put it in the set slot they want in whatever space they want. And
Oh, I
other
think I get
people,
it now. You're
and
okay.
people can
This is
optionally
like
let it out
that.
or not.
Okay, I didn't realize that's what you were doing with the Canva board. Now I get it.
Yeah, trying to, you know, I was trying to do more or less an unconference thing, but try, because we only have 3 hours, try to have a solid idea of what the topics we want to address are before we get there. But that
I
first
don't know though.
hour is
Are you hoping a whole bunch of people are going to come in here and like put it okay, it took me 5 or 10 minutes to even kind of realize what you were doing, and I don't have high hopes that like we'll get 20 people to come in and vote on the post-it notes in the next 7 days.
Yeah,
Might.
maybe we need to this is oops, these instructions here are meant to help people understand that, and if that needs to be
Oh, I see.
tweaked, let's do it.
Hey, I have another question. Are people invited to present at the summit if they're not physically present at the summit? And then same question for viewership.
I don't think they are providing us remote stuff at the summit.
Okay.
David, last I heard, there were 42 people registered. I think we have space for 45. We can maybe get up to 50 with some standing room. And there's a surprisingly large number of people.
So have you gone down the list of names and like started to figure out who all these people are? Because that's I think another thing is there might be people who have very, very little background.
Yes.
And we're just like, oh, this sounds like an interesting topic, you know, and like how those people would contribute and participate would be very different from someone, you know, who's been working with extensions for a long time.
David, yeah. And we can add more spaces or whatever if it makes sense, or people can just, you know, arbitrarily go to a corner because it's an unconference. They can elect to do whatever interests them. I just kind of hoping to have like our, I don't know, top 6 things we think are most important to get to ahead of time. Jeremy, I looked at the list. Melanie sent me the list of participants, and I recognized perhaps a quarter of the names. There were people who are pretty involved in the community, and the rest I don't know at all. So I think it's going to be all over the map. Anyway, if there's
So
go ahead.
okay, so I think all right. So so would it work if somebody wanted to do a presentation, they grab stickies from the left, and then you could also duplicate stickies because maybe there'd be some overlap, and then you put them in a session.
Yeah.
But there's basically supposed to be only one name per field, basically. That's who's presenting. So that's like
So
section one name there.
you can put however many names on it as you want. You know, the open technology usually says there's one person who's facilitating and another person should take notes.
Okay.
But whatever works. The way I'm imagining is like people say, okay, I want to talk to other people about, make some decisions about, I don't know, documentation standards. So they go off to a corner and they talk about it for an hour. There are some notes. And at the end, we're going to have another session, the final half hour will have readouts from whatever was talked about there.
No,
But
I see. These are small working sessions, really. It's not like
yes.
it's not like a conference presentation. Okay, got it.
No, yeah. I mean, somebody might, come prepared with a brief presentation if they want to kind of set the context, which is what I was trying to do for the overall thing here. But the idea is like, yeah, these are working sessions. Like, okay, here's the thing we want to look at, and we want to have some recommendations or figure out the parameters or, have a plan maybe at the end of it. My ideal personally is that at the end of this, we have a good idea of what are the most important topics to address earlier on in the process of building out the next, the ecosystem in the future. So we can start planning for how to execute on that from those proposals, decisions. That's how I'm thinking about it.
Okay, yeah, I see.
This sounds a lot like the coffee ops meetups that I've been to, which they have a similar process where you use physical post-it notes and kind of vote on topics, and then everybody drops off into groups based on what they're interested in.
Yeah, it's probably the same. It's probably the same thing, the open technology stuff.
Okay, so maybe we should like do one field so we kind of get an idea.
Sure, let's say here, somebody comes along and there are a bunch of stickers on this one, right? So we know that that's something people really want to talk about. So if somebody will take ownership of it, they can control click, select add your name, find a slot that makes sense, and we may not use all these, and drag it to it. So I'm going to take the first session to talk about this. Let's get all these. I can't do it right now. And then people, I don't know, can put their stickies on it over here if they want. So you have some sense of how many people are interested in attending and talking about that topic, but there's no hard and fast rule. But basically, whether or not they do that, say, okay, David is going to wants to talk about identity, namespacing, and uniqueness in the core registry, and we're going to do that in the first session. And I'm going to be over in, I don't know, the northeast corner of the room. I'm going to try to get access to the room earlier in the day so I can have some idea of how it breaks up, and I'll tweak the Canva here to add stuff as appropriate.
So are you wanting us to put post-it notes over on the agenda now before we know what's been voted for?
Yep. Especially if there's something like the idea you had, Jeremy, if there's stuff you feel like is missing here, or it would be a different approach, stick it in here. It may well be that, what I've come up with here is not that many people are interested in, but they want to talk about those 5 extensions. One, 2, and 3 as labels instead of just one per person. David, I'm sorry, I don't follow.
So basically, like rank choice. If you're gonna do, I don't know, core one time and the binary packaging one time, and they're running at the same time, well, I want to do both. I want to do core. That's my first choice. I want to do binary packaging. That's my second choice. If I gotta choose, I'll go to number 1. But if you have enough people saying, I want to see this, but that's my number 2 option, you're running binary packaging twice, not conflicting with core, so you can get more people.
I see. Yeah, have people stick like numbers on the topics that are most interested in them. Yeah. Let's see here. Sure. There we go. Yeah, I'll stick those somewhere that's reasonable so that people can rank them if they want. Their, top choices. This is all going to be super arbitrary and unscientific. I just kind of wanted to see where things collect. The way I've seen it happen before is people just drop like stars on stuff. We say, okay, this one has 4 and this one has 8. So we definitely want to talk about that one. Who's going to own it? That sort of thing. I think what makes sense is to send this an email to all the participants in advance. Hopefully people will, take a look and have some sense of it and maybe put a few things on. And then those of us who are organizing it and you're going to be facilitating on the day, we should meet like a day or two before and kind of go over it and make some decisions about what we definitely think should be covered and what things are open and get a little more sense of how we want to run things. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think chatting ahead of time would be a good idea.
Yeah.
A bit more.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see how the Canva thing goes and
Yeah.
what happens with it.
It might be a mess, whatever, but the answer is that whatever happens, this is the right place. Whatever it starts is the right time. Whatever happens, it could only happen here. It's super arbitrary and free, and we can adapt as much as we want as it goes. But I think that's it. Do you all feel like you have some of a sense here then of what we want to do?
Well, not really, but that's okay.
Okay, well, so here's what we were supposed to do. So are we supposed to go find people who might be interested to present? They will already be in the list of people who are going to Vancouver. Then
Yeah.
we talk to them about these post-its and we say, would you like to have a small discussion about one of these things? If you are, then put a sticky note on it.
Hmm.
And then we put the sticky notes in the fields.
Yeah.
We have a list of names associated with the sticky notes. Like maybe Yuri is interested in binary distribution. And then maybe David is also interested in that. So there's like 3 or 4 people in each section. And we're trying to make sure that if you're
So-
interested in multiple sections, you get to go to everything.
Yeah, you can float and try to organize things and maybe, I put sessions in here assuming people would want to spend like an hour, but maybe a topic only takes 15 minutes.
The other, extending on my earlier thought on what people want to see, people who are willing to present and to present on multiple things. If we have a gold stars for like who's willing to actually present on this topic. So here's a topic. I got 8 people who want to see it, but only 1 possible presenter, or I got 5 possible presenters and 3 possible viewers. But you have that dynamic of ranked choice for both. I'll present stuff, or I'm only a viewer.
Well, I think that typically these things are self-organizing. Like somebody says, okay, I want to do this. I will facilitate and I need a note taker, but they negotiate amongst themselves about how they want to go about doing it. I don't think it necessarily has to be like a formal presentation. And usually these things are not. Usually it's just like somebody saying, okay, here's what this means. This is the topic we're going to try to cover. These are the decisions we want to make. Go.
You're describing the unconference
Yes.
component of PGCon that has been done in the past.
More or less, yes.
So should we just come out and say this is an unconference? I mean, doesn't that make it? Then everybody knows what you're talking about really fast, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Like
I mean,
we're doing the same thing as
yeah. I mean, I try to capture that here, but we can use the word unconference for sure. No, I don't. There we go.
Okay, so I imagine there's people who might be interested to present, but they just aren't in this meeting right now. So
Right.
maybe it's like we need to go out and advertise this to people. That's
Yeah,
call to action.
I want to draft an email to send to all the attendees. Melanie told me we can send an email to everybody who's registered.
Yeah, and to be clear, it's full, right? Nobody new can register at this point.
As far as I know, but I'm not sure how hard and fast the rules are. I don't think any more people can register, but it doesn't mean other people won't wander in. You know, or people might have registered and then not come because they're, you know, in the patch session or something. So I volunteer to draft that email today or by tomorrow and share it with the Slack channel for feedback. I think, especially if you're giving me notes, especially to clarify what things mean, because it seems like there's a bit more questions and confusions about how it works than I anticipated, in part because it's kind of unorganized by design. Oh, that's a good thing to include, Jeremy. That's a good call. But to, you know, try to maximize participation of the people who are planning to be there. And it may be that they say, I don't know, you know, oh, this sounds interesting or whatever. So, and I'll add some different stickers to this for some different meanings, like I'm interested, or I want to take ownership of this, or this is my first, second, third, or fourth choice. Sound good?
Yes, yeah, that sounds good to me.
Thanks, Stephen.
Sounds good. Yeah.
All right, great. Thanks everybody for coming.